one of the guys I've been hiking with, he was telling me how he doesn't really like videos where people just give their opinions. And I don't think he meant to direct it at me, but I thought about it because that's kind of all my videos are. But then I thought, that's why science has ruined the world. I mean, what is philosophy other than people just giving their opinions? And what is more important than philosophy? What has done a greater service to the exploration of mankind's soul than philosophy? I mean, you look at the greats. I mean, they were philosophers. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. These are the people that changed everything, brought about mathematics, political ideologies. It all started, astrology, though. I mean, astrology is kind of woo-woo. I mean, the act of looking up. Philosophers were the first ones to do it. And people with opinions have changed the world. Opinions are all we really have. And that's what science is. That's what science doesn't understand. You prove things with the scientific method, but at the end of the day, it's still just an opinion. We don't know the laws of the universe. We don't know what is true and what is false. Everything is opinion. But as I said, this video is going to be many opinions all over the place. So, sorry. But I also think I came to find the meaning of life. Which is a pretty bold take. And you might say, how? How can you say that? Everybody's different. There's no one meaning to life. But my meaning of life, my meaning of life is subjective. It's to follow our hearts, to follow the still small voice, to trust our instincts, and to do that which we know is right. Now, I know in my heart of hearts that I know in each and every situation what is right and what is wrong. When I walk by a piece of trash, something inside of me tells me to pick it up. When I do something that is, a vice or something, something inside of me yells at me to stop. When I align myself with this voice, something inside of me praises me. Now, I know this to be true, and I know this to be the meaning of life, and I know this to have freed me from anxiety, worry, and has given me immense purpose. And you don't need to worry about the future, because there's really no need to even think about the future. You can think about it a little bit, but at the end of the day, if your heart tells you to do something, when that present moment comes and you don't listen to it, you made the wrong decision. Virtue is when we listen to that which is seeking expression in us and we express it. That is virtue. And I believe each and every one of us has a divine voice. And this is where, that's honestly nothing really new for me, other than now I kind of put the big label, meaning of life, on it. But also, sorry for my breathing, but I'm at like 15,000 feet, so, and I'm, walking a pace faster than anybody, so, I mean, it's bound to happen if I'm talking. But this is where my philosophy has really taken a different view, because I tell this to people and they tell me how wrong I am. They tell me how foolish I am, and I know in my heart this is true. So it sounds pretty wrong, and I honestly don't trust people. I don't believe people. I don't believe that they don't have this divine spirit within them. There's some mountain goats. I don't know if you can see them, but yeah, I don't believe these people over there too. But say if I did believe these people, then what does that make me? Because I know these things to be true. I know. So does that just make me better? Does that just make me of a higher nature? Does that just make me, Overman? As Nietzsche says, the Übermensch? I don't know. I know this to be true, and people protest to me. They swear to me that they don't have this divine spirit, that they don't know what to do, that they can't do these things. I don't know what to do. If I believed men and everything that they told me, I would have no choice but to accept that I'm just of a higher nature, that I am just of a different caliber. I mean, the things that I do, the discipline, the principles, the ideals that I hold myself towards. Now, as I said, I don't believe man. I don't trust man. It's like when someone says, oh, I don't want to sit down, but they're eagerly walking towards you as if waiting for you to move. People don't know what they want. People know what they want, but they want to say the herd answer. They want to, say what is socially acceptable or something stupid like that. But in reality, their body doesn't listen. They say, no, stop. No, please don't. While they're reaching out their hand for what you're offering them. I refuse to believe man because I refuse to give up on man. But they make it hard. And you make it hard. Because you don't live up to the ideals that you say you're going to live up to. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do when I live up to an ideal higher than man day in and day out? And I expect everyone to be able to do the same, and they don't. What am I supposed to think? Now, another thing that's switched about me recently is my pride. As you can tell, I probably sound very prideful right now. That I'm better than you, that I'm more disciplined than you, that I'm more courageous than you, that I live up to higher ideals and principles than you. But that's the thing about, this pride and humility. People are going to hear me say this and think it's just an opinion. But I've spent truly more hours thinking about what pride and humility are than people have spent thinking about, things they value highly for like 2 years now. I remember calling, one of my best friends, shout out Layton, and I was like, man, I don't believe in humility because, as I've said on this channel before, everyone who's quote unquote humble today just lies. But now I finally understand it. I finally understand we cannot be humble without being prideful. It's like I heard Jordan Peterson say one time, there's like 3 stages in life. You start off as naive, and they're all in order of what is best. You start off as naive, and then you go to you become cynical. And many people would think this is a step in the wrong direction. And if you end there, arguably it is. But the next step after being cynical is wisdom. And if you can become naive to cynical to wise, being cynical is worth it. And it's the same exact thing with pride. You start out with no confidence for lack of a better term, then you become prideful. You know, you think you know everything. You think you can never be wrong. You think all these stupid things. And then you're humbled. And if you stop there, then you're just prideful and you don't listen to anybody and you think you know everything. But if you continue, then you reach humility. You understand that pride is one of the most important things we can have in life. And we all should have pride in who we are, in what we do, in everything. But at the same time, we must be humble. We must realize that we could be wrong in everything. Because at the end of the day, everything is just an opinion. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, we don't even know if this is a simulation. We don't even know if we're just a brain in a vat, as Descartes said. We don't know anything. So to be prideful to think that you know even one thing is foolish. But we have to be prideful. We have to die on hills. We have to die on hills with humility, knowing that I only die on this hill because nothing better has been brought to my attention. And it's better to be prideful than have no confidence. If you do the due diligence and you come up with the belief system and someone just says, oh, you're wrong, you know, okay, believe them. But if you're a deep thinker, if you put time into these things, you have to understand people die in the hills of half-baked opinions all the time. And they make it seem like they've thought about this more than you. I mean, this is obvious. And I've heard people say it, you know, and you probably know it too. At least deep down you know it. If you say something with enough confidence, people will just believe you. If you die on some hill, you know, half the people would just be like, well, he's pretty passionate about it. He's probably looked into it, you know? And when you have pride in yourself, when you know that you've done the due diligence, especially in metaphysical matters, like who can be right about anything metaphysical? You know, we can't be right about anything, but metaphysical the least. But that's just been something I've been thinking about very deeply. You know, pride and humility. And I finally come to understand that you can't have humility without being prideful. If you're just humble, if you just lie all the time, like, there's also another stage to it. You know, maybe my 3 stages doesn't work. Because there's also the stage of someone who has pride, but they think humility is such a moral virtue that they just lie through their teeth. I remember I used to work with this guy, and he was the best at everything. And when people tried to tell him, you know, he would, no. Yeah, he'd laugh it off. And, you know, there was something about that made you like the guy even more. But at the end of the day, I don't know. It's like, yeah, like, you are the best. Of course, you're not the best, but if you're the man for the job, stand up. You know, we live in a horrible world if the man for the job never stood up because he wanted to be humble. And only the narcissistic people who ended at pride stand up, who know they're not the best. But if they stand up and say they're the best, half the people will believe it. And the other half, they won't stand up because they don't want to seem like they're prideful. They don't want to ruin their humility. They'd rather talk behind the person's back and say, I'm better than him. But yeah, man, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about that. because I thought a lot about pride and if we should have it, why or why not we should, all these things. And I can't help but think that, I don't know. It's horrible to say, but if I trusted people, which I don't, which is, prideful in and of itself, then I'd have to be convinced that I'm of a higher nature, that I'm better, that I'm something. Because there's this thing inside of me, and all I do is listen to it. And if you tell me, and if you really don't have that, thing, then what does that make me and what does that make you? And ever since I started listening to this thing, my life has become better. I've become a better person. I've become more virtuous, less anxiety, less worry. In all ways, I've become a better person. I've destroyed the vices that held me back, all from just trusting in my inside voice. And I don't know. I remember the day it was awoken. I was reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I read this passage, and he said, I think it's at the beginning of book 5, he says, you don't love yourself enough, or you'd be running to do as your nature demand. And I knew exactly what that meant. I knew exactly that meant that the fact that you don't listen to your instincts, to your gut, to your soul, and don't do the things that you know in your hearts of hearts you should do, you clearly don't love yourself enough. Because why would you deny yourself that? Why would you deny yourself what you know in your heart to heart to be what you have to do, what is true for you? Nietzsche says, what does your conscience say you should do? You should become who you are. We have to live in accordance with our nature. We have to listen to our conscience and become who we are. We have to trust the still small voice. For, it says in, I think, Isaiah, God is in the still small voice. And to me, I only ever had to hear these things once. I only ever had to have these things be brought to my attention once. And I knew they were true. I knew that was what I had to do. And no, it's not easy. And that's why I've also been thinking about what the most important virtues are. I disagree with the Stoics. They're not 4 cardinal virtues. There are 2 cardinal virtues. And it's courage and discipline. It's the courage to listen to your heart. The courage to do that which you know you must do. And the discipline to see it through. The courage to act, and then the discipline to act for years. Doing that thing, seeing no fruits, not understanding why. Not understanding why. And then out of that, you get justice and you get wisdom. Because justice is listening to the still small voice, doing that which you know you must do. That is to me virtue. How can an action be virtuous if you deny what you know in your heart to heart to be true? I believe this thing inside of us is outside of space and time. And if that's the case, maybe society would label what you're about to do a vice, a crime, an atrocity. But if you listen to that thing that's outside of space and time, who knows what will come of this? Who's to say that it's that? Who's to say that it's a vice? Who's to say what will happen in the future? It sounds ridiculous, but I literally, every moment of my life, try to trust this thing. And obviously I'm not perfect. Nobody is. But hundreds of times in my life, I've walked by pieces of trash and it said turn around. And hundreds of times I've turned around. And hundreds of times I haven't turned around. And I believe I've paid for that in one way or another. If only being a bad conscience. You know, I remember even as a kid, I've never lied in sports. I've never cheated in anything. And I remember one time playing basketball with my friends, and, you know, I hit the ball, and, you know, they were like, oh, it's out on me, or out on them. And I was like, no, you know, it was out on me. And, you know, people always think that's weird. But for me, I would have had a bad conscience. And then actually, I remember after, you know, like, we got the ball back, and I made like 6 threes in a row from, like, 2 of them being from half court. And I know in my heart of hearts, my conscience would have ate me alive, and I wouldn't even have been able to make the first one. But instead, I was shooting with a clear conscience. And, you know, in the moment, yeah, giving the other team the ball, it's not good. There's nothing good about that. That's never good in basketball. But then when you have the hindsight of what actually happened, yeah, you know, they missed the next shot, and then I hit 6 threes in a row. It's like, all because I trusted my instincts, all because I trusted my gut. And these are trivial examples, but sometimes trivial examples are the best for understanding profoundly simple and simply profound matters. And this is no exception. Trusting our still small voice, our gut, our intuition, it is the meaning of life. Steve Jobs said it. You know, he says, trust your intuition. Somehow it already knows what you want to become. And it's so true. It's so true. And that's the only life worth living. Because any other life that you live, you're only alive. You're not actually living. If day in and day out, you don't do that which you know you must do, what's the point? That's why I say it's the meaning of life. Because that's the only thing that gives life meaning. And when that's your why, you can bear almost any how. You know, I'm still stoic in many ways, but I'm not nearly as stoic as I once was. And, you know, in my way of just not really caring about rationality, I think that's one of the ways. But I think the Stoics believe more in the rationality of the universe than the rationality of the soul or of actions. So in that way, we're still pretty similar, because I believe everything happens for a reason, and that reason is for the best. But just living in accordance with our nature, that's the meaning of life. And if your instincts, and that's the other thing too, you know, it's not easy to get to this place. You know, I've spent, like years and years, at this point, years in solitude, you know, reading, writing, contemplating, going on hikes, doing all these long adventures by myself with my thoughts. And I've been able to turn that knob on the voice, on my heart, up. I don't think it's as loud as it used to be, but I do think it's always been there. But it's so much easier when it's turned up all the way. So yes, you need to do things to turn this thing up. And nothing is better than solitude. Nothing tells you what you're doing wrong, what you should be doing, better than solitude does. And it's so easy. You know, as I said, I think thoughts are outside the space of time. So when you ask yourself, what should I be doing? The first thought that comes to your head is it. What we do after is called thinking. And that's when we destroy our divine thoughts. That's when we tell ourselves we can't do it, this, that, and the other, so on and so forth. That's when we destroy the divinity of our thoughts. when we start applying thinking to the realm of thoughts, when we start applying space and time to matters outside of space and time. Nature helps a lot as well. I might make a whole nother video on this topic, but I'll say it here just because, I mean, there's probably only a few people here. But one day there will be millions here. But I think nature is a mirror into our soul. That's why people who love the city can't understand why people love nature. Because, you know, Sin City. There's no Sin Mountains. You know, I've had so many things stolen from me in cities. You know, I never had anything stolen from me in the mountains. You just leave stuff and, you know, you come back a week later and the only reason it'd be gone is because someone would think it's littering. Like, but yeah, I think nature, especially mountains, are mirrors into our souls. And when I look at nature, the first thing that comes to my mind is always the same: infinite divinity. And I think that's within each and every one of us. And being in nature while at solitude is the quickest way to becoming who you are, or at least knowing what you should do to become who you are. Now, as I said, I think, it's a whole nother topic I could get into. And that's a deep thought I had on this trip. But I think I've rambled on long enough. And I hope you enjoyed my opinion, because that's all it is. That's all anything ever is. You know, go to a science textbook 200 years old and tell me how much of that science is true. And go to a philosophy book 2,500 years old and try to figure out how much they got wrong. Try to say this doesn't apply to my life nowadays. I challenge you.